Dear students, wishing you a very good day. I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say that a woman has to play several roles in her lifetime, be it that of a mother, a daughter-in-law, a daughter, and a wife. But the role of a daughter is one of the most complex roles that she has to play. We have here a very touching and beautiful poem, My Mother at 66, written by a prolific writer, English writer, Kamala Das. Kamala Das in her lifetime wrote both in Malayali and in English. She was born in Malabar, Kerala, and she died at the age of 75 in 2009. So, My Mother at 66 touches upon the themes of aging and complex human relationships. Let us read through the poem and then understand what the poet is going to say about why being a daughter is so complex, why is it one of the most complex human relationships. I begin with the reading of the poem. My Mother at 66 by Kamala Das. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me, doze, open-mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. But soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, worn, pale as a late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache, my childhood fear. But all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. So that was the reading of the poem. I'm sure the very first observation made by you is that the poem is written in free verse, there is no rhyme scheme, and it is indeed a long sentence without any full stop. In fact, it ends in an ellipsis. So that is a different way of writing. It is as if the poet is trying to narrate one thought after the other as and when it comes into her mind. So now let us go through the paraphrasing of the poem and see what we can understand as to what the poet is actually trying to tell us. The poet is at her parents' home. She must have come and spent a long holiday out there. And now she is going back to Cochin to the airport, and her old aged mother is traveling with her in a car. They're traveling in a car, the journey is by car. And it's then that the poet suddenly realizes that her mother has fallen asleep beside her in the car. And when she glances at her mother, she is shocked to see how old and frail and grey her mother looks. Indeed, her mother looks almost as if she is like a dead corpse. And that suddenly shakes the poet out of her reverie, and she is stunned to realize that her mother is no longer now a young lady, but in fact is an old woman of 66. So what does the poet do? She does not just dwell in that constantly, she shudders maybe, and then she puts that thought away. A very beautiful line. She puts that thought away, and then she begins to look out of the window. The car is speeding ahead, and what does the poet notice? The poet notices that the young trees are sprinting, that is moving very fast in the opposite direction. And that obviously is a symbol of growth, of energy, of vitality. Not only that, when the poet looks out again, she sees young, merry children spilling out of their homes, just as children would. Children are full of joy, full of vitality, full of vigor, full of enthusiasm. And again we have the device of contrast where the poet shows old age against youth. Then suddenly, after a point of time, ultimately they reach the airport. And you know what an airport does. It's a very impersonal kind of a place. At the airport, the poet is immediately engaged in completing formalities of taking the boarding pass, the security check, the baggage check, etc. And then it's after a point of time that she suddenly realizes, okay, my mother is also there with me. And then when she looks back, she sees her mother, and again she's struck with her appearance, that her mother now signifies old age, death, and decay. She is extremely pale, extremely colorless. There is no mention whether the poet's mother is suffering from some kind of fatal disease, but nonetheless, we can read between the lines and make out that maybe indeed the poet's mother may be coming towards her end. When we realize, and the poet then uses a very beautiful simile at this point, as late, worn pale as a late winter's moon. So she compares her mother to the late winter's moon. Always traditionally in poetry, winter's moon reflects to the waxing and waning of the moon. Over here, the waning of the moon. These are symbols of approaching death. What does the poet do? Can she stay back? Can she forego her commitments and responsibilities? We are not made aware of whether the poet has to rush back to her job, or whether she has a family, or she has her husband to tend to, her children to tend to. But nonetheless, it is so difficult. She cannot wait a single moment longer. She has her obligations and commitments to fulfill. And what does she do then? Again, at this point of time, she feels that old familiar ache. It should be noted that the poet was extremely close to her mother. In fact, her mother was one of her influences in becoming a writer, because her mother too was a writer. So she had a very close binding with her mother. But nonetheless, she cannot give everything up and stay back with her mother. And what does she feel? She feels that old familiar ache. What is this familiar ache? Maybe as a very young girl, she was separated from her mother, and again that old pain revisits her, and she feels extremely sad, and I'm sure guilty too. Old familiar ache, my childhood's fear. And then what does a person do? But all I said was, see you soon, Amma. See you soon, Amma is so loaded with meaning. If you read between the lines, you do not know whether the poet is feeling that maybe my mother is no longer going to be there the next time when I come to see her. For all you know, she might be dead by then. But just to reassure herself, and also more to reassure her mother, she tells her, see you soon, Amma. And that is the way, a very unemotional kind of a parting. There is no mention about a quick hug or some tears being shed, but a very matter of fact, a very formal adieu to her mother by saying, see you soon, Amma. And then the final lines which convey, all I did was smile and smile and smile. So very cleverly, the poet uses repetition to emphasize the point that she is helpless in this situation. The smile over here is more to reassure her mother. The smile over here, in fact, is quite hollow, quite artificial, because at this point of time, she can do nothing. She cannot, change her travel plans and say, okay, I'm going to stay back, I'm going to tend to my mother. No, she has commitments. And this is that is why I talk about complex human relationships. A daughter, everyone knows that once when she gets married, she has to leave her parents' home and then seek out a new life. She cannot stay back and do the things that she would like to do, and especially if the daughter is living in a different hometown, it becomes even that much more difficult. However, she may want to. That is what you mean by complex human relationships. So I'm sure you've understood what I'm trying to say that in this poem about my mother at 66 regarding complex human relationships. I would once again like to touch upon aging. Aging definitely is a natural process. It is irreversible. The poet not only fears about the aging, her mother's aging, but also her own aging. She realizes that this is inevitable, and that is why she uses she's not ready, she's not mentally in a way prepared to face this aging in a person so close to her. That is why when she says over here, doors open mouth, her face ashen like that of a corpse. corpse is a dead body. So she is really taken aback and she shudders at that thought. But then she realizes that old age and youth are two sides of the coin. They are inevitable. So again, I would like to stress upon the poetic devices used in the poem. I already mentioned in the beginning, the poem is written in free verse. It's a huge long sentence in which there is no full stop. Then when you talk about simile, you have a simile in as old as she looked, and you have a simile as late as a winter's moon. So here the usage of simile is there. Then you have repetition in the last line. All I did was smile, smile, and smile. Repetition to emphasize a point. Then you have symbols used in tree sprinting and merry children spilling out of their homes. Trees, as I told you, it's a symbol of growth, vitality. Similarly, merry children spilling out of their homes is a symbol of enthusiasm, vitality, growth. Then you have another symbol in as late as a winter's moon. Again, as I told you, winter's moon symbolizes death and approaching death and decay. So I'm sure the reading of the poem and the explanation has made clear this very beautiful and touching poem, My Mother at 66 by Kamala Das. Thank you.